Hi.
Hi.
If you like the podcast, if you like this podcast, if you already know you like this podcast, you could come and support us on Patreon, and then you can join our Slack. It's patreon.com/grandpodcast, and it's just like a little mini donation, and we're very creative. We'll think of very good things to do with that donation, but it's a show of support. It's something that helps us, grow, justify this to our others, and justify it to those in terms of time, in terms of how much time we spend on it. But yeah, just that's patreon.com/grandpodcast. Are you thinking about anything people could look at this week?
I'm thinking about restaurantsbrighton.co.uk/food-gifts-Sussex, where you can order yourself some Sussex deliciousness to keep some of these independents going during these COVID moments.
Can I ask you a question about why don't you say dash instead of hyphen? You'd save 3 syllables in that URL. So you could, if you want to get there quicker, go to restaurantsbrighton.co.uk/food-gifts-Sussex.
That sounds very fast.
Punchy.
And efficient.
So punchy. I am a very successful businessman. I have a business. You can tell because I'm in my early 40s and white and don't work for anyone else. I'm a very successful businessman. I have a company called Good to Hear. I am interested in not being a boy that just feeds off your addictive, like creating apps that are just addictive and farm your attention for ads. I'm actually trying to do something that helps you genuinely, and in exchange, all I ask is the tiniest amount of money for the app that I spend hundreds of thousands of hours working on. So it's just like imagine that as a new business model for business, not being an asshole and farming people's attention out and squeezing them dry and doing things that aren't any use to them, trying to make something useful. That's what I'm trying to do. So if you want to get on that train and just get introduced to what I'm doing, go to goodtohear.co.uk/free, whence you will get a free ebook all about tracking happiness. And will join my mailing list, which is all about lots of other things around that subject. goodtohear.co.uk/free. Fuck boy. Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast, weekly podcast on the state of the universe. My name's Michael Forrest.
Wow, the universe.
I've expanded.
I'm Ivanka Magic.
Ivanka Magic. And I've just expanded the scope to the universe because we've got to get out of here. Enough is enough.
Okay.
This week we're going to talk about the cult of efficiency, by which we mean to say this, and basically in terms of the public sector, in terms of the sort of basically poisonous effect that the idea that making things more efficient is an effective way to run emergency services or services for people, to help people when they're in trouble, and all of the problems with the limitations of adaptability that you have when you optimize for efficiency, the limitations in the ability to respond to new problems that you create by being very efficient, and thinking about everything in terms of optimizing how much money is coming in and going out.
I think the cult of efficiency, I will posit that the cult of efficiency is inhumane and is actually inefficient.
I
don't know how I'm going to make that argument, but let's see. That's where I stand.
We can talk about the cost of poverty and all that kind of thing. How much more it costs when you false economies, all that kind of thing.
Yes, making one thing more efficient does not necessarily mean that the overall thing runs well or is efficient. And why do we want to be efficient anyway?
Yeah, exactly. What's so good about that?
Who said that's a good thing?
Capitalism thinks it's a good thing. And just that whole thing of capitalism supposedly being a highly efficient way to do things, when actually there's loads of ways that you can expose its massive inefficiencies. in terms of bullshit jobs, for one, and many things around that. Okay, there we go. That's an intro. If you're not hooked by that, then I don't know. I don't know what will hook you. How's it going?
Today, I picked a carrot out of my garden, rinsed it and ate it.
Rinsed it?
Rinsed it under the tap because it had soil on it, earth.
Was it all hairy,
So
that carrot hair, green carrot hair?
It wasn't super hairy.
No. I mean, as in, like, the stem coming out the top of it. Was that deliciously abundant?
Yes. But that was delicious. I thought you meant because carrots have those tiny little roots.
Yeah, little tiny hairs.
Okay, no. It had plenty of green hair, but it was not overly rooty or hairy. It was deliciously crunchy and lovely, and that was a great little activity that I did this morning ahead of recording the podcast.
Can I let you in on a little secret?
What is it?
I bloody love carrots.
Oh my gosh, a food thing that Michael and I can agree on.
They're just like crunchy enough that you can munch away on them, and just with no impact to any sort of the calorific value is limited, given how much crunch you can get out of them.
They are glorious, yes.
Because of the way I'm wired, I have to just state my only criticism of carrots is that if you eat too many, your teeth start to hurt, because there are some sugars in there, I've noticed. So I have to sort of curb my carrot intake sometimes to avoid that.
I have never eaten carrots to such excess. I have to say, no carrot has ever made my teeth hurt. But, okay. So, yes, we're excited. This is the first time I have grown carrots from seed. I was probably a little heavy-handed with the seeds and have not thinned them out. And there's been some despite advice from a good friend who said, I know it feels wrong to be killing living things, but thin them out. And I just couldn't, so I didn't. And so we've been waiting for them to grow. And Nick is refusing to pull them out because he's like, oh, they're not ready yet, they're not ready. But this morning I just went in and it was worth it. We're quite lucky at the moment. The garden's really becoming a grocery store we've got Swiss chard, curly kale, cabbage, courgettes. What else we got? Carrots now, small carrots, but we've got basil, we've got parsley, we've got coriander. We're just like,
how's your rosemary? Have you got rosemary?
I've got loads of rosemary. I've got a whole rosemary hedge.
Just cannot get our flipping rosemary to grow. We just can't. It's just one just died, and the other one's just like it's just sort of looks a bit sick, and it's been exactly the same size for several months now, like since last summer even. And it's just what? And then we look down the road, and there's these bushes, enormous bushes of rosemary, and you're like, well, I want that rosemary.
Have you fed it?
Fed it? We've tried all sorts. I don't know. Maybe we should feed it more. What with?
I bought for my no, I don't know that does anything good. I think I would recommend one of these liquid foods that you then put in your watering can, dilute it, and water it. Gardener's question time.
Too much
with Ivanka.
Gardening. Too much gardening talk every week. Michael and Ivanka's gardening podcast.
Anyway, yes. How are you, Michael? How's your week?
Sharon had some days off, so I did some half days again and took a couple more days. And just like I've been feeling sort of like a bit demotivated on everything, and just wanted to give myself a bit of space to figure some things out about because I've sort of feel like I've done the 3 initial months of promotion on I'm all just thinking about work on my apps, and just not really seen anything yet. But the one nice thing that happened this week was I was like, I could make that into an Instagram ad. And I made an Instagram ad, and people have actually been clicking on it and signing up for my mailing list. And it's maybe costing me like 25p per person. So if some percentage of those buys an app at some point, or doesn't just immediately unsubscribe from my list, or starts to buy into what I'm talking about, then maybe that's the thing I'm looking for. You sort of want if you can make more money than you're spending on advertising, then that's a machine that you can pump more money into, and hopefully that goes somewhere. But yeah, this is things having got paid last week off all of these crazy pandemic shoot sales. I did buy some new music gear, and then I just yesterday bought one more thing. And I am committed to selling some old stuff, but I ordered this other thing. So I've got some new music gear coming in, which is exciting. And my studio is looking very studio-y, and all the stuff sort of plugged in and easy to record. And so I'm just looking forward to making some songs still. But I feel like I'm doing a lot of thinking about it. And then when it actually comes to doing it, I'm like, I get that. I'm sort of a bit scared of it, I think. I'm a bit scared of my music equipment. Anyone would be. Any normal person would be confronted with it. Efficiency sounds like a nice thing.
It can be.
Inefficiency certainly seems like a negative thing.
Yes, inefficiency is certainly negative. I think efficiency definitely feels like a positive thing, and I think the implication is, so for example, in the context of me working at the moment, where I'm working sort of 8 to 6 most days, because I've probably said yes to, I've had a bit of overlap on on 2 projects, and so I'm having to put in a few extra hours. And I'm enjoying myself. I love what I do. I am feeling incredibly inspired by at least 2 of my projects, which is brilliant. But when I sit down at my desk, I have to, efficiency is a useful word. Like, why am I chatting do I need to talk to this person? What is that about? Do I need to do that? When do I have to do But then, I think that's prioritization. And for me, when I'm looking at how to be efficient, there's something about making sure I have the space to think on the things I need space to think about. So I think, you can be efficient on, I don't know, getting dressed in the morning, or the things that actually aren't. Well, for me personally, I don't sit there doing my makeup. I've never worn makeup. I don't groom excessively in the morning. So it's like, just quickly, what am I going to wear? Do that, Bob, and then but then sitting down and contemplating my day, whilst I time box it, I don't rush myself through it because I need to set myself up properly.
Yeah.
So,
and there's sort of like needless inefficiencies, like if you had all your clothes in the other end of the house and you had to keep walking backwards and forwards, or like not learning keyboard shortcuts, and then you're sort of sitting there like taking ages to do anything because which you could just be doing a lot more quickly. There's loads of ways that you can. Yeah, there's a lot of sort of needless inefficiencies. I feel like one of my greatest source of inefficiencies has been like the focus switching thing, and having different things on the go, or like working in my day job and then sort of having a side project and finding it hard to switch into the side project mindset. And I feel like I've solved that with the app I'm working on, Done Good. I feel like I've solved focus switching.
Context switching is hard because there's a lag.
Yeah.
While your brain catches up with.
Yeah.
So just because inefficiency is tarred with a negative brush and efficiency is tarred with a positive brush, it doesn't mean that everything that is efficient is good, and it doesn't mean that everything that's inefficient is bad. Yeah.
So you were saying you can't meditate more efficiently.
No.
Like, you can't give yourself space more efficiently. You can sort of like be efficient around that and say, okay, I'm going to start here and end here. But you wouldn't like, I'm just going to try and make this meditation more efficient. Or like exercising even. I'm just going to run more efficiently. Does that going to... No, you sort of like, it's all about the time you're putting in. I wonder what other things there are.
But I think even like some of the things like the way we travel, like, you know, the way we buy food, you know, so much bad has been created in the world, so much rubbish, so much pollution in the name of efficiency. You know, ready meals that aren't very nice or that you've taken no pleasure in preparing, or that you know, okay, we all have those. I mean, I do buy ready-made pastry. I confess,
Fake
but
cookery
you know,
person.
but taking the time to, I don't know, prepare a sauce for pasta rather than buying it out of a jar, or I don't know.
In many times it's those things we sacrifice in the name of efficiency are where life happens. That's what human existence really is: cooking and preparing and hanging out. In favour of, no, you need more time in front of your spreadsheet. You need more time, like, being in the office, having meetings, doing all that kind of thing that the market values, and you must sort of optimise everything else away. Like, when you have, you're just taking taxis here and there because, you know, and it does generate...
Speed.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of the things that people say are, like, you know, transport, I think, is a really good example, because walking... I think things like walking between meetings, walking across London, even if it's going to take you half an hour to walk, I think, versus, oh, look, we can hop on the tube, we'll be there in 10 minutes. Yeah, but if I walk, not only have I had some exercise, I'm relaxed, I've, you know, probably calmed my brain down, had some processing time, moved. Like, you know, what about the efficiency around that sort of, you know, those kind of activities that perhaps take longer in time, though arguably often don't.
Yeah.
Cycling is probably more efficient than using public transport.
The number of times I've seen the rest of my team has got into an Uber to come back to the office, and I've just got on my bike, and, you know, I'll see you when you get here 10 minutes after me. But
then I suppose, like, when we're talking, if we're going to do, maybe semantics is a useful thing here, because, like, when people say efficient, they're talking about, you know, we translate that into time, so we translate that into faster, we translate that into I don't know, less distance covered, but usually it's time, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's
but really all it means is
also
because,
cost, you know, like
But both of those things are really, they're not, efficiency really just translates into maximising profit. Yeah. It's like, if we spend less time doing a thing, then, and we sell our time, then that's more cost effective, or there's more, we can do more things in the time that we are being paid. We can, because that's what we're measuring. We're just measuring time. We're not measuring the creative value of the output, or the, I don't know, the impact on the planet, or the amount of rubbish that got created, or, you know, do you know what I mean?
Well, when you hear about the companies adopting a 4-day work week and getting more done, because a lot of what is done in an office is mucking about and, like, counting, sort of wasting time. But because, I don't know, because you're there so much that, like, there's no way to sort of survive without so there's that good post about how pointless work meetings are a form of therapy. So you're just kind of like having a meeting to just try and, like, make some space and show your status and sort of just talk to other people about the world. It's not really about, and so you can get very frustrated about the inefficiency of too many meetings, but that's to forget that, I mean, the reason they're there is to sort of try and cancel out how sort of oppressive the sort of work day, working for a living, really is.
But I think, you know, I said in the intro, I was talking about being humane, because the examples we've got are all very sort of middle class, you know, white collar job examples of efficiency. But, like, you know, where it becomes, and we can fight them, because we can go, whatever, I'm walking. Don't do tubes, don't fly, you can make these claims because you have some sort of professional status and somebody's hired you for a reason, whatever. You have, like that Amazon post, you know, the guy who resigned from AWS. It's like, you know, you have some power, but then if you're going to be like the person working on a production line, and, you know, you hear these stories about grown women wearing nappies because they don't get enough time to go to the loo. I mean, you know, that's where efficiency becomes an evil, inhumane tool. So, and I think that's where it's, that's where you have
that's
to
where
be.
it causes problems. I'd quite like to explore a bit more of the inefficiencies that can rile us up, because I may have mentioned before, but I did once work in the government housing department for Newham Council, and I was infuriated by the inefficiencies there. And that they had this backlog of thousands of applicants for social housing. My problem was that the systems that they were using were just completely incapable of sort of supporting any kind of workflow that would allow anyone to get through anything. But now I talk about it, I'm like, well, maybe the system wasn't the weak point, but just the fact that there was this perception that people were trying to sort of like get one, and it will happen, like people are trying to find a way around the system to sort of get through to it. And one of the reasons that was able to happen was because there was no like unified, that you could just create different personas in multiple different departments, and there was no connection between those, so there was no way to sort of like cross-reference anything in people's sort of housing claims and things. And that was always the perception that was one of the reasons that this was out of control. Now I think I would probably say maybe the reason it was out of control is because there wasn't enough money being put into building goddamn social housing. And if you actually sort of maybe that would be a better thing, and just let the people working there do their jobs and the human elements of their job.
So this is where I think the time efficiency is a positive. It's like when you said putting your clothes on the other end of your house when you're trying to get dressed in the morning, and having to walk all the way, all the
get
way
one sock
across,
at a time
across your mansion.
Go back, put on one sock, go back to the walk-in wardrobe, get the other sock, come back and sit down on the futon, have a quick sip of an espresso. Go on. Anyway, I think watching Billion porn.
The technical. Like the technology equivalent of that, where time efficiency is very positive is on things like processing claims. If I can speak directly to the bank in some way and confirm a payment and confirm an amount, or the HMRC can talk to somebody in welfare claims and confirm the amount of tax that was paid over time without having to wait for somebody to, write a memo, send it over, get it processed. Those things that can be done technically, the cutting and pasting from one system into another system, all that sort of stuff. If it can mean that somebody gets a claim faster, if it can mean that the person who would normally be doing the cutting and pasting isn't being slowly destroyed by the mundaneness and the pointlessness of their job, then I think efficiency in that regard is brilliant. And I'm a great advocate or proponent, or one of those words, of stop getting humans to do things, boring shit like that a computer can do, because it doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, and then that reminds me of my NHS A&E experience, where just coming in, and this was where I saw an inefficiency. It was like I came in, I explained what was going on to one person at a desk, they sent me into another room. There was no communication. I explained the thing all over again to the next person, and went through about 6 people over the course of that. And it was infuriating. It's like, can you not write this stuff down somewhere so the next person could just read it? But I wonder, in an ideal world, or maybe the reason it's like that is as to try and make it more efficient, is we'll have all these stages of triage, and the next person, the next person, the next person. But maybe if there were just enough people, you just go, okay, he's going to look after you, and then that person would deal with you, and then deal with the next person, instead of this kind of convoluted chain of sort of custody.
I think that might be one explanation. Equally, I was thinking about that in that context. Making you repeat yourself may be a way of, maybe a way of establishing something like, this person claims that, but let's check he's not after some free oxytocin.
If they were cross-referencing, that would make sense.
How do you know they're not? I mean,
it was pretty clear they weren't.
Fair dues. But I think that we've got but I think that's an example. If I were doing user research...
Yeah.
I'm not that bothered about the findings of the person who did the screening. I want to have the conversation. I want to work out if I think they're lying. I've got some data about the person, so I've got a vague idea of who I'm talking to, but I'm going to test it all if I'm doing a qualitative interview. So I don't think like we could make that process more efficient and I could not repeat the same questions. But most of doing user research is basically if you're in a qualitative interview, you've probably been asked the same question about 6 times so that the researcher can work out, as well as possible what matters of what you've said. So it's not efficient at all, and by design.
Okay, but are you really saying that you think that accident and emergency is, I'm going to say accident and emergency is a prime example of something that they've tried to make efficient, or that is understaffed, presumably in the name of efficiency, in the name of cost cutting and sort of reducing costs. So we're going to have fewer doctors, and because maybe it won't rain, maybe there won't be any, and that is a prime place where you want it to be very inefficient in terms of the number of people that you're employing, rather than like trying to turn it into some optimized chain of we're going to just keep kind of passing you off, and everyone's going to be interchangeable, and no one's really going to get any care. Everyone's going to sit there like shivering and feeling bad for as long as possible. Whereas if it was a real emergency service, it would have lots of people sitting around with nothing to do most of the time. Like that's what it should look like. It's what a good emergency service would be.
Maybe not lots of people, but quite a few people sitting around.
Enough people. For the worst case, like that would be great. Or at least some people like on call that can kind of come in. You can tier it however you want, but like a good emergency service, it's like that these people are going to have something else to do while they wait for something to happen, or it's not really designed. It's not an emergency. You're just dealing with stuff that you can predict, and then that's a different problem that you're solving there.
Yeah. So that it might not rain part of the efficiency argument is the one that is the most troubling in the context of emergency services or welfare or any of those things, which are effectively emergency. I think you could argue that welfare is an emergency service.
Yeah, the whole thing is like if something bad happens, we want to be caught. We want a bit of protection from being on the street and having to murder people for their wallets. Like we would like an alternative to that in case things get bad in ways that are beyond our control, or even ways that we did fuck up. Like we should be able to take risk. We're trying to spread the risk across as many people as possible. And that, again, it's not efficient, and it shouldn't be.
In terms of A&E type setting, I don't know enough, and I don't have enough figures, and I'm making it all up really. But it seems to me that there is a point at which, if you narrow everything down so that it is quote unquote efficient, all you're doing is kicking a problem down the road, because by making the access to housing more efficient it depends what you're making more efficient. It always depends. Like if you're making it more efficient, the process of getting a no more efficient, all you're doing is increasing the problem of homelessness. And then you've got how do we make then the process of provisioning houses for homeless people? Like during COVID now, many homeless people and rough sleepers have been put into hotels in various cities, but it's a slow process where that kind of thing, it's slow because people need to take responsibility, there's costs involved, there's budgets, there's all kind of things. But and that's because you've made the priority looking at budgets and counting money and counting things, instead of the priority being what's the quickest way to get this person off the street and into a safe environment. And it doesn't have to be, like we're not talking 5-star hotels, so we're not talking about waste. Efficiency is not the opposite of wastefulness. Like, it'd be a waste of money to put everybody into some sort of like high-end, top-end luxury hotels, I imagine. But But just because we're not wasting money on 5-star hotels doesn't mean that it's more efficient to have loads of budget meetings and getting sign off on getting what we're going to do to get homeless people off the streets during an epidemic.
Yeah. I think about all this in sort of evolutionary terms, in terms of like, it's just like the adaptation. You can only optimize, you can only become efficient if you adapt to an environment which is stable. So you adapt to, I don't know, you develop a really, really long beak that can fit into a certain type of plant, and then that's how you live. But like, you can't really then do anything else with that beak so easily. And now some mite comes into existence, which you know, all of those plants that you usually feed from suddenly disappear, and then you disappear as well because you're too efficient. And it's better to be inefficient, like worse at lots of things in some, and than really highly efficient at one thing. Because and this is the sort of like the banking sector, like it's sort of, it had stability for long enough that it would start to bring in all of these completely absurd. It was just like, you know, the subprime mortgages and all that sort of lending and all those like packaging up and packaging it up and like deferring the problem, and it just made it completely fragile. It just made it like topple as soon as that. I don't know what I'm saying.
No, I think you're right. Like, I think I agree with you in terms of like, if you are super efficient. So the opposite would be a tool that is really, really good, or a musical instrument or a piece of technology that is perfect for making this one thing. And that's brilliant because it's a tool. We're not asking it to be creative. We're not asking it to survive. We're not asking it to do anything. We're just asking it to be a really good, you know, fold up bicycle, like a Brompton is a really good fold up bicycle. It is no good. The Brompton is no good when you suddenly find yourself on a road without asphalt and with big, you know, rocks going across it, because it's only good at the one thing. Whereas if your evolutionary example, I think, is a really good one, because highly specialized species cannot adapt to changes in the environment at all. They can't survive the competition, because in your hummingbird example with the long beak to get the nectar out, that's because they've eliminated the competition for that flower, because they've got the best tool for that job. You take the flower out of the equation, they're competing with everybody else again for all the flowers that don't need a really long beak. And the problem it does all, the tool example, the animal example is much more useful, I think, to humans, because if you apply efficiencies to things that are by their very nature unpredictable, like emergency health, like welfare, like pandemic preparedness, you are going to not have enough PPE.
Yeah. And that's exactly what's happened. And that's
what's happened. And
our government has been obsessed with efficiency for too long. And when something bad happened, we were completely ill-equipped.
Yeah. Efficiency at the cost of contingency.
Yes.
It's like, you know, if I were to run my house, I am of an age now. 10 years ago, I'd have been in a very different position for sure. 10 years ago, I met Nick about 10 years ago, and that's had an effect on my life, which one of the net results has been that I now have some savings. I have somebody else we can have a conversation with. Brexit's coming, what are we going to do? Well, we need to make sure we've got some money here, not do that, and reduce our spending. Get ready for a bit of a problem to occur. But in your... and I think that's a luxury position to be in. But if I, as an individual household, can be having conversations about what if, I don't know, whatever, then the government should be doing that, and it should also be programming in some safety. What if, because after this pandemic, once we've shifted the virus, there is then going to be an unemployment pandemic, crashed economy pandemic, and probably a mental health pandemic. I think that's a very real potential output of all this. And I don't think we've got any slack in our systems or any reserves to help cope with that at all. And that's what the efficiency over safety is the dangerous one.
And the the people that do the most damage tend to be the people that don't perceive that there is a risk of themselves failing.
Yeah.
So, the coked up bankers, the one thing cocaine will do is make you just jump into something without considering the risks. And will then...
Coked up bankers and wealthy politicians. Politicians with inherited wealth. I mean, I remember about 20 odd years ago, having this conversation with my sister. She was like, "Do you know what? I think I'm going to get rich first, make sure I've got no money worries, and then I'm going to go into politics so I'm uncorruptible." And which is a kind of, if you take that, but I think, and I'd kind of stand a little bit with that argument of, there is certainly if you're looking at Balkan politics, people very much see going into politics as a way to get some extra houses, like shore up their financial reserves rather than to serve the people. But then if you take that to this whole inherited wealth gang, this inability to think that I listened to this talk the other day. I dialed into this FT live global boardroom thing, and one of the quotes I took from a post-it note has just fallen off just as I need it, and I've been looking at it for about 3 weeks now. She's like, we all think the impossible can't happen, but the impossible has happened, said the editor of the FT in her intro to the global boardroom. It's like, if you have never seen your deepest fears come to reality in any form, and largely in life, our deepest fears are lack of safety, which are to do with money. And if that is not a problem for you, you've got a problem, in my opinion. How can you serve the people? Where's my lovely post-it note that reminds me that the world is... it's like, I think that's the number one problem with this efficiency business. Because I think it's inefficiency not to be prepared for your father to drop dead, unannounced and unexpected. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's my definition. First thing I did, had a child, wills, plans, conversations about what happens if one of us drops dead. Because to me, that is not an impossible situation. That is a very real thing that happens.
People think that the private sector is more efficient than the public sector. And if you read David Graeber's Bullshit Jobs, he talks a lot about how most senior level jobs in the private sector are people that don't really do anything and will admit that they don't do anything all day. So the private sector is very good at spending a lot of money on people that don't do anything.
I have been recently on a call with, I think there were 7 people. Of the 7, 2 people, and I include myself in that, actually have to produce some output that is, and everyone else was just counting and writing things down and measuring. I was like, I found it so exhausting to be in a meeting where I was like, basically I've got an audience. Why have I got an audience of people watching me work? I don't want an audience of 7. It was really felt that, and it's much more exaggerated in a remote meeting because, like, you're not all sitting around a table equal. There's very clearly 2 people talking to each other, and everyone else just watching.
And Dave, he also talks about how these, this is why a lot of this, let's outsource this to India, like ostensibly in the name of efficiency, but really just to give them something to do. because they've got nothing to do. Well, I could do this. Okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
No, not think about whether or not it's a completely stupid idea. Just do it for something to do. And that's the private sector most of the time. They're trying. The people with no power in those companies are getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. Meanwhile, the people in the sort of mid-level positions are just like, I don't know.
Well, it's like the India argument is usually like, well, our cost per hour for a developer based in London is this much, and our cost per hour for a developer based in India is this, but that must be better. Well, but what about the time explaining to the developer in India what we actually want made? They just write a document, because, that's a really great way of telling a developer of a designer and a developer communicating about a system via a document.
Developers love documents.
Oh, I love them. And designers love making them.
So yeah, all this, the conservative argument that the private sector is in any way more efficient than the public sector is pretty easy to disprove.
Yeah.
So that's not to say that some things can be made more efficient. It's silly to go and get one sock at a time and then go and sit down and then go and get another sock. But, it's good to learn to touch type. It's good to learn your keyboard shortcuts. It's good to have systems that support people being able to do the human part of their job well. Because a lot of the time you'll hear people complaining about the system doesn't really have the feels that they need to do their job. Like it's been designed with one idea in mind and it's really hard to use in the way that different people want to use it. So almost I suppose there's an implicit efficiency in designing a user interface that if you make it too optimized for one task and you haven't done your user research and you haven't talked to people and you haven't actually been able to iterate on it, you end up with something that is completely useless to the people using it, and you create inefficiencies of everyone having to use bits of paper and losing bits of paper again because you tried to save money and cut corners when building that system, and thus ended up with something that was no good to anyone. Yeah. In the name of efficiency. And just as a final point, often a race to efficiency is the same as minimizing quality. How low can we make the quality of this?
Oh, totally.
So no one gets to put love into something because everyone who's counting the beans is obsessed with how low can we get the quality? How can we minimize how much we spend on it? And hence,
Yeah.
So this is what happens. We're just
maximizing profits.
Lowest possible quality we can get away with.
Looking at the high street, I'm going out. And I kinda spend a lot of money. And I'm not gonna do everything I always try to do, recognize and do sound.
Next time you hear someone just casually using efficiency in a way that is synonymous with good, maybe kind of think again and go, actually, maybe this one isn't where you need to be. Just think of it in terms of, is this a thing that needs to have contingencies? If it is, then don't make it too efficient.
Yeah. It can be efficiency. Getting efficiencies can be fun. I will add this. On your commute, working out, those tips you can share with people that if you stand here on the station, then you've only got the door, all that sort of stuff. But that's fun. But that's also about maximising the amount of time you're going to have at home or with your family or at work, whatever it is you're trying to optimise for. So I think efficiency is cool as long as the thing you are trying to be efficient about actually is what you want to do.
I would say efficiency is fun, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
I mean, what if I want to walk and get one sock at a time, because I'm trying to up my steps? What if I'm trying to, so it's about work out what you're trying to do and then work out which bits need to be efficient.
You say that there's no efficiency without sacrificing something else as well. Like if I am now working from home every day, that's more efficient in terms of travel, but when am I going to listen to my podcasts?
Exactly. Big problem.
If you like the podcast, go to grandpodcast.com.
Michael's made this really efficient button. It's an orange button. And it doesn't matter what you're on, it'll subscribe you on your device in the app. And if it doesn't, you need to tell us so he can fix it. Because his brief was very clear that he gave himself.
My podcast editing process is also very efficient. I type in the times that I need to beep out a swear into one document. I copy it, I double export, double click. So I gave myself 15 minutes to release the podcast. Now I can do it in 7 minutes sometimes. Trimming out.
Don't tell him that. You've asked him for money to cover the effort that we put into the podcast.
What that means is that I've made so much more space for things to give to you, listener, for the money that you're going to give us. I don't know. Look, I've made it efficient, but by making some things more efficient, we've created a bit more space for ourselves to have a chat before we start, and hopefully
exactly.
Anyway,
nice.
You can find me goodtohear.co.uk/free, michaelforestmusic.com, all that shibbles. Did I ask you about Twitter?
No, you can find me, Atibanker, on Twitter. That's the best place.
Yeah, and all that. And subscribe, do stuff. See you next time. Hope you're staying safe and hope everything's not too far. Bye! Bye.